I
Yeah.
think kind of causes some worry.
Yeah. So I want to hear what you did, but before we did that, we have a couple people saying hi in the comments. So hi Chris,
Oh,
hi Leonore, hi Rachel. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys are struggling with finding the work-life balance, finding the good life while learning to code, so that we can address some of those issues. But Danny, what did you find that particularly helped you
well,
during those times?
I will say too, actually, on a side note too, that like I remember early on, like that was when it was the hardest. It did get easier as time went. And I think part of it too is like what you were just saying, like you're excited about doing something new, right? You're changing careers, you're doing something you want to do, like you're in the area now, but there's so many options, it almost seems overwhelming. And then you get all these ideas, about what you could potentially do, things you might do, and it you overwhelm yourself, right? But I think it does get easier over time because I think we naturally sort of, well, like look at the three of us, right? We each naturally kind of fell into areas that are slightly different, because those just happen to align with our interests more, right? So it's like, I think we all, if we just keep at things too, we will find our way, and that does, eventually levels out a little bit. But I think also, I think for everybody, watching now, and for everybody, I think really taking time to like do some journaling, think about like what matters to you, like what values really matter to you, what is really the end goal that you want from this, like, do you want, is it like, are you just pursuing money? Do you really want like freedom? Is it that you want to be able to work at home and live somewhere else and spend more time with the people you love? Is it that, what is your end goal, and kind of clarifying that as much as you can, because then that can be a real aid, I think, both when you're down, like to remind yourself why you're doing it, but also to make the right decisions when you're faced with choices, so that you stay to a course that's correct for like your goals, your values, and the life that you want to build.
Yeah. That's a really important point that you mentioned there, kind of finding your values and your reasons why. And then actually like digging down on those reasons why. Like I'm sure a lot of people when they get into coding, they're drawn to it primarily because of the money. Like it's one of those things where you can come from any walk of life, you can learn it in a few years, and essentially probably in 5 years you could be making a six-figure income, 5 years or less. And
Yeah.
so like there's not many fields that you can do that in, but that draws a lot of people to coding. And but you have to add, like, money is not a be all end all. And I love Jim Carrey. He had a quote where he's like, "I wish everybody could get the fame and the money that they want because they realize that's not where the answer is." And it's like essentially you need to make that amount of money. Like Will Smith said it really great in his biography, where he's like, I always thought that the problem was I didn't have enough money, and then I made a whole bunch of money, and I realized the problem was me. And
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah, it's like all of a sudden you recognize that hey, maybe, I mean, money solves money issues, but then there's a whole bunch of other issues left in the world.
Yeah, and look, I get it too, because I went through the same thing where, like, when you have money issues, it feels like that's really the only thing that's the problem, right? Because it's stressful, it's on your mind all the time, you can't do the things you want. But the reality is, that's just a part of it, and the most obvious, maybe. I see we also have Rachel said, struggling with the pressure that I should be learning to code fast. Oh, yeah. This is a hard one that, I think we all struggle with this too, because yeah, every book says learn Python in 24 hours, learn JavaScript in 5 minutes, be a master at this in whatever a day. And it's like, dude, it's impossible.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know?
but she mentions that article, and I think I read that article how it takes 10 years to become a good programmer. I think I read the same article. And but it's a good point because it does really take that long to learn it. But nobody would buy a book that's like learn C++ in 10 years. They would be like, "No, I'll take the 24-hour one. Why does it take 10 years?"
Well, the other problem is I think we also like the media and stuff loves to like focus on like these like, overnight success things and stuff. And like we love to act like, people magically make it to this point of expert with no work. Like overnight, they're just like, I'm gonna do this, and then they're great at it. But the
Mhm.
reality in the real world is not like that. And like, yeah, you can learn basic stuff. You can definitely learn like some basic things about HTML, about Python or whatever in 24 hours, but you're not gonna learn, anything in depth and be an expert at it by any means.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, getting clear about like getting clear about your expectations and what's, realistic expectations is also important, I think. That's a really important
Absolutely.
one. I'm glad you brought that up,
Yeah,
Rachel.
and just to respond to Rachel, like I experience that all the time where I think I should be learning a lot more quickly than I am. And it's like a big struggle because I'm like, oh, why is this taking me so long? Like these other people are geniuses and it's taking me so freaking long. But then I just remind myself that it's, this is something that I'm probably going to be doing for the rest of my life. And uh I wish I could remember, but Gary Vaynerchuk had a quote where he's like, there's really no pressure for me to do it quickly because the only person I'm competing against is myself, and I have my whole life to do this. And it's kind of like once you're able to recognize that you don't need to compete with other people. Like you are going to be the best programmer, period. You're going to bring things that nobody else can bring, and it's just going to take you however long it takes you to develop. And generally that's going to feel like a lot longer than it should, but it's just one of those things that takes time to develop. And then you get to look back and you can see like, oh, look at where I've come. Like Danny and I talk about this all the time, how like when we stop competing with externals and we start looking at ourselves like a year ago, 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago, our minds are blown because we're like, oh my goodness, look at all that progress. Whoa.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too, like, because I know Chris also said he struggles with keeping motivated and doubting the future too, and I think these are related. Because I know for me, like when you feel like you're not learning fast enough, you feel like you're somehow failing, right? That's the imposter syndrome too. But I think when you get your expectations more on a realistic level, like, okay, in a year, I'm going to be in a much better place than I am now with respect to this. But also keep in mind that you're doing this to like because you want to and because you want to make a better life for yourself. Like all that together, you can look back and see the progress you've made and also realize that things in your life are going better because you're doing something positive, you're learning, you're growing your skills, right? You're doing all these things and you got to look, yeah, you have to make comparisons only with yourself, I think. That's the most important thing. Like it's good
Yeah.
to work with others, it's good to seek out mentors, it's good to seek out like community, but don't compare yourself to others because it's a losing game. There's always going to be somebody who knows more than you, who's faster, whatever, right?
Yeah. And I can relate to that with struggling to keep motivated and doubting the future because it's very easy to doubt the future. You're like, how could this possibly do
Yeah.
whatever? So there are like for me, there are a couple things that I remember in my mind that just always help whenever I'm doubting the future. Like there's this, I talk with Danny all the time about Wim Hof breathing, and he makes fun of me for it because it's something that I do to clear my mind, but I really enjoy it. And but anyways, this dude Wim Hof, he you know, somebody, I think Tim Ferriss asked him, he's like, if there's one thing that you could tell yourself when you were younger, what would it be? And he said, have faith. And not like religious faith, but just have faith in yourself. Like recognizing that he developed into pretty much like a very influential person, but he was going through a lot of struggles at one time. And he just wanted to tell himself at that time, have faith. And that I try and think of myself as an older person telling me that now to have faith. And then the other thing is Marcus Aurelius, who's probably like, one of the most influential people from a long time ago. He always says you can have anything you want by some circuitous route. You can have it right now if you just let go of the past, have faith in the future, love what is, and act right. So he's just saying like whatever past, just let go of it. Like a lot of us, I was in a, like I had a bunch of student loan debt, and so I was like kicking myself for probably a decade for having a lot of
Yeah.
student loan debt, and it was hard to get past that. But then letting that go, being like, whatever happened, happened. It got me to where I am, but wherever I am, I can change the future. And then just having faith in the future. So you don't know what's going to come, but you have two choices: either believe in it or believe something terrible is going to happen. And when something terrible happens, generally you have the resources to handle it then. Don't need to worry about it now. So you might as well be optimistic and then just love what is.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally true. And it's funny because I think like when you're coming into like especially because like everybody here, like changing careers, right? You're switching from one career to another. And a lot of times it feels like you're starting over, and that's really, really hard because you feel like you're really far behind. And I mean, I went through that myself. I remember like, and I know you did too, actually, with our old careers. Like, do I really want to stop doing this? I spent all this money to go to college. I spent all this time trying to do this. But it's like, yeah, I'm unhappy. At the end of the day, this isn't working. So do I want to be miserable the rest of my life or do I want to try something different? And I think we also forget too that we don't like even when we change careers, it's not like we're a blank slate. You know, we bring all those skills, all those, everything we've learned, it comes with us and we just build on it. So I think, you can't live in the past. You can't really stress about the future because you don't know what's going to happen. So you just have to do your best now and just focus on the
Mhm.
present. Also, too, on a
Absolutely.
side note, when does negativity ever help anything anyway? When
Yeah.
does it make things better? When does it make us happier? When does it improve our
Never,
situation? Never. Yeah.
never, never. Yeah. So there's a couple other topics that are hobbies. I think hobbies are really important. I mean, we've been talking about this a lot recently, is
Oh
having
yeah.
hobbies because I'm like I'm pretty much a workaholic, and I think you're like kind of
Yeah.
close too. And so having the hobbies to be able to, I don't know, do something to let your mind unwind. I think that's really important.
Well, it's also low
Especially when
stakes.
you're
Yeah.
dealing with the feeling of doubting the future and thinking that you're not learning quickly enough.
Yeah, I think it's important because hobbies are like, they're that low stake thing where you can just do it for the sake of doing the whatever you're doing, right? It's not for money, it's not for some goal beyond the thing. It's just to enjoy yourself, to be present and to have time for yourself, but it also lets your brain kind of like process things. Because I think that's the other problem. Like I know when we started out too, I was spending so much time learning to code, but it's like if you don't give yourself a chance also to like process what you're learning, it's you get overwhelmed quickly and get stressed out quickly. I also want to just point out real quick too, because I think Russ might have said it in one of his comments. I like what he said there too of like just writing like one line of code, or something like that. Like setting like these really small goals too when you are struggling is really effective, where like you cannot fail, right? Like today, like if I'm stressed out about it, like I'm just gonna turn on my computer, sit in front of it for 5 minutes and write one line of code. That's it. That's my goal, because like it's easy to achieve, and then before you know it, you'll end up sitting there for an hour, or 45 minutes or
Mhm.
whatever. And even if you don't, it's okay. Being a little bit
Yeah,
easier on ourselves too.
yeah, because it's like getting rid of that. If you don't do anything, you're going to feel miserable about it all day. But if you have this goal, write one line of code, and
Yeah,
you write that one line of code, then you can leave and you can be like, well, I did it. It wasn't the greatest day, but there are always days like this. Oh, that's a great one. Reminding yourself that there are bad days.
and it's
How
okay.
how yo, okay, so this is a great one. Is so like Danny and I talk pretty regularly because we have a podcast where we talk about like philosophy and stuff, called the Existential Stoic Podcast, if you want to look it up. But we talk, so like we've done hundreds of episodes together. And it's funny because when we're struggling, the exact things that we need are lost. Like
Every time.
we can we do not have the resources that we need when we're struggling. But like because we've built up kind of a library of episodes, whenever I'm struggling and Danny's not available or my brother's not available to talk to, I'll look up an old episode and then I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh my goodness, we knew the answer. Who was this guy? But it's
Yeah.
like totally gone. And so like when you're struggling with coding, which is going to happen, and when you're having bad days
Yeah.
with coding, reminding yourself that you're going to have bad days, looking towards external resources if you just don't have the resources inside yourself at the time, because that's what they're there for.
Well, I think also too, I told you that saying like it's another cold dark night on the side of Everest.